In this video, I want to discuss atonality. What is atonality? The definition of atonality is music that has an absence of a pitch hierarchy where all notes are equal in importance. Now, that sounds nice and democratic, but does it translate to good music, or whatever we think good music is? If you've ever gone to a concert or listened to music where it sounded like the performers were just singing random notes, then it was very likely that that composition was an atonal piece. What we mean by atonality, of course, with the prefix a, means a lack of. So if we just talk about the word tonality, tonality is a lot of the music that we've listened to where it was in either a major key or a minor key, where the tonic pitch around all the other pitches are oriented were something like C major. Everything was centered around the C major tonality. Right? Now, there's certain social overtones with tonality that maybe some composers or musicians who were kind of pushing the envelope as far as atonality is concerned, they thought that maybe the tonality maybe represented more of a monarchy, where we tend to gravitate more towards a kind of an equal sense of the tones. And but musically, though, it's interesting how that we tend to gravitate more towards tonality over an atonal piece. Arnold Schoenberg is probably the composer who is most associated with atonality. His dates are 1874 to 1851. He was born and taught in Vienna and Berlin, but was forced out due to, of course, all the unrest in Europe during this time. It's ironic, though, that he had this strong admiration for the German, Austrian music tradition, loved Mozart, loved, Beethoven, and all the classical and romantic composers that came before him. And then what he did was he emigrated to France at first, and then eventually came to the United States in 1933. And we usually associate him with atonality because he's one of the first composers to actually abandon tonality and decide to write music that was not based off of a major or a minor key. Wrote a lot of what we call serial compositions, otherwise known as 12-tone rows. You could read a little bit more about that in your textbook here. Now, what are 12-tone rows? 12-tone rows are basically you take the 12 different pitches that you could possibly have. Let's say on the piano keyboard, there's 12 different notes that you have, including the sharp and flat keys, and you can take them in any order, and that creates the basis of your composition. For example, if you wanted to write a composition that consisted of E, F, G, C sharp, F sharp, D sharp, G sharp, D, B, C, A, and B flat, that contains all the different notes of within one octave, that would be the basis of the composition. What's interesting about this technique is that there are so many different possible combinations of these different tone rows with 12 different pitches. How many different ideas can you come up with? Well, mathematically speaking, there are 479,001,600 different tone rows that you could actually come up with these 12 different pitches. And somewhere in there, I'm sure there are some brilliant musical ideas that you could do. And basically, I guess what his most, what was driving Schoenberg was to change our concept of what dissonance is, to kind of free composers from being restricted by following so many of these rules that have been established over the years as far as tonal music is concerned. And this atonal music lends itself very well to the movement of Expressionism. What is Expressionism? Expressionism is art that seeks expression of pure emotional states liberated from all repression, exploring dark, previously hidden emotions, or pure and ecstatic emotional states once considered taboo. Now, there's always been expression of emotion in music, but this movement looked to delve deeper into the psyche of the artist or the character that was being portrayed in the art. Expressionistic music is not usually pleasant to listen to, so don't approach it hoping to be entertained, but a lot of times it's thought of as a therapeutic outlet. One source describes expressionistic music as music that comes to terms with your fears, insanity, hysteria, or other repressed emotions. The beauty in the conventional sense is not the object of the expressionistic art, but the psychological truth of what is going on within the artist. And all expressionistic art, whether it be literature, painting, movies, music, rejects conventional representation but favors devices such as exaggeration or distortion of reality. Some of you might be familiar with this particular expressionistic art piece called The Scream by Edvard Munch. It's kind of become a cultural cliche, but still has the power to move new viewers, and it's kind of indicative of the expressionistic movement. This painting was inspired by the poem by Van Franke, and the poem kind of goes like this. I was walking with two friends, the sun was singing, the sky was red as blood, a sense of melancholy came over me. I stopped, sick and tired unto death. Above the dark fjord and the city there was blood and tongue like flames. My friends continued onward, but I stayed behind, trembling and anxious. It was as if a scream were tearing through nature. So you can hear through the language that inspired this particular painting, the use of words such as blood, comparing the sky as red as blood, and trembling and anxious, this tongue like flames, using all these different exaggerated imagery to really delve into how the subject in this particular case is feeling, really delving into the fears and psyche of the artist. The piece that I want to share with you that is indicative of Schoenberg's style is this Pierrot Lunaire, or at least one piece from it. Pierrot Lunaire translates to this moonstruck Pierrot, and it is a collection of expressionistic songs that centers around this character Pierrot, who's a clown, but is also representative of the misunderstood modern artist. The piece that we're going to be listening to is Moondrunk, and there's a vocal music guide in your textbooks on page 324 to 325, and it's in a rondo form. But what unifies the piece is the use of the ostinatos and recurring motives, but it is an atonal piece, so you'll get that sense through this example here. It's also scored for voice, piano, flute, violin, and cello, which is kind of a unconventional instrumental grouping, to say the least. Another thing that you want to listen out for in this particular example is Schoenberg's singer's use of the technique called Sprechstimme. What Sprechstimme is, it's a mixture of both singing and speaking. Literally means speaking voice, and the singer speaks but on only certain distinct pitches. So even it sounds like she's just speaking, these are actually scored by Schoenberg specifically. What this does, it helps enhance the exaggeration of the emotion that's being portrayed, and also reinforces the surreal quality of the text and music. I have a YouTube video that's on the channel. If you go under the 20th century music, you can find the Pierrot Lunaire, this moonstruck piece, and you could. I'll also put a hyperlink where you could just click on this if you're just watching this video also on YouTube. But here's a little sample of what this piece is like. Again, you don't want to go into this piece as far as trying to be entertained. I don't think it was intended to be that way, but more of an expression of some, deeper rooted emotions and possibly even emotional problems, kind of a therapeutic outlet for many of these artists.